Welcome to Parashat Ki Tetzeh, and I'm delighted to have with me a really dear and old friend, Rav Yonatan Lipshutz. And you are the person that I first came to stay in Tzfat with. When I first decided to come to Tzfat, I stayed by your place for a month to see whether I would really connect with the city. And you were so kind to me, and bless you.
My pleasure. My honor.
Thank you. So tell me, you played a beautiful piece there. What was it?
That was a niggun, a melody that here in Tzfat, in Breslever, we use for the Shabbos Mavorchim, the Shabbos before the new moon arises. There's a blessing on Shabbos that we have, and that niggun is used during that blessing. And we all gather around the bima, around the center of the synagogue, and we all sing it to our heart's content. Sometimes there are tears.
You're a Breslever.
I don't know if probably aren't enough days, enough hours in the day to be a Breslever, but
How did you become connected with Breslever?
How did I become connected? Well, first I have to put thanks where it really applies, and that's to my wife. We moved to Eretz Yisrael, moved to Israel 2 weeks before the Gulf War, January 1st, 1991. And I didn't have these. I think it was the saltwater air that they started to grow here, I don't know. And,
Natural growth.
Right. And we realized that the current state of affairs here in Israel are not perfect, as many people can attest to, and we saw it more as a next stop on the train, the next station. And I found myself going to Uman, which is where Rebbe Nachman of Breslever is buried, that same year, right? So I arrived January 1st, and Rosh Hashanah, sometime in September, I found myself going to Uman. That was the year that the Iron Curtain had rusted. And I found something much mutually enhanced coming to Israel. Let's say that. Coming to Israel was one level, and going to Uman and learning the Rebbe's Sfarim and about Hisbodedus, about meditation, and is another level. But it's wonderful to have them both.
Do you remember, I don't know if you remember, but when I came here, I was incredibly engrossed in the idea of Jewish meditation. And you very kindly got me a meeting with Rav Koenig.
Oh, wow.
And the two of us sat with Rav Koenig, and I asked him, why isn't there more in Jewish meditation available today?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was in Hebrew, and I said, I didn't understand a single word of it. And outside you explained everything to me and said, oh, now it makes sense.
What did it say? Tell me now.
I can't remember.
Should have recorded it back then.
We did. I have to find the recording. So, what does going to Uman do to a person? I mean, this is a place where this tzaddik was buried many hundred years ago. How does that affect and change so many people's lives?
A very good question. I think one of the many answers is that halakha, Jewish law, is all about going. It's not about arriving. It's not, the matara, the goal is important, but many times in life, most lives, most times, most places, we get thrown off course. And the process is what's important, how you act, how you react to circumstances that are beyond your control, right? Who's in control really? And how do you deal with that environment? It's not, right? We're not robots, and everyone has a different halakha, right? What's right for one person is not necessarily right halakhically for another person. And that's why when you have shilas, when you have questions, you need to go to someone and explain to them your whole Weltanschauung, your whole outlook on life and where you've come from and where you are and where you're going and all the specifics, because there's no one else in the world like you. And so unique, really. And so what's good for you is not necessarily right for me, halachically speaking. Yes, there's a broad framework. So going to Uman, it's a process. It's a process that one needs to go through, right? Whether it's buying the ticket and all the and the expenses, and then the travel and all the problems that one arises on the way, and so that's one aspect of that process alone can change you, right? And then of course there's the whole idea about the tzaddik yesod ha'olam, the
righteous
who's the support of the world, the pillar of the world. What does that really mean? And Rabbi Nachman called himself that, the tzaddik yesod ha'olam. Yosef HaTzadik is also called tzaddik yesod ha'olam. That the whole world is supported by him, and what that means to us individually, right? Who are maybe very far from connecting to God, connecting to Hashem. Regardless of whether you're religious or not, right? I always say there are plenty of people who are religious, but they're not spiritual, and there are plenty of people not connected. And there are plenty of people who are spiritual, but they're not religious. It's a bit of a dichotomy, and a person needs to find his equilibrium.
My wife and I had the blessing of going to Uman just a couple of months ago.
Oh, wow.
In the middle of the war.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. I would never have thought of going there, but my rabbi told me we should go there. And so, what do you do when your rabbi tells you should go there? But
Well, you can argue with him.
Yeah,
you're allowed.
There's no point arguing with him. But it's fascinating. We went to Mizhubish, and I really felt it was just us and the Baal Shem Tov. It was like having a private meeting with the Baal Shem Tov. And I have to tell you, I'm not a Breslever, and I don't have connections with Breslev, but that really took me to a different place. And I began to understand the pull of so many thousands of people that go there. It's quite remarkable.
It really is. It really is. Yeah.
But tell me, you came to Israel. Were you always a fiddler?
I started playing the violin when I was 7 years old. I was born in Queens, New York, and I was 6 years old, and I saw an itinerant violinist, and people from the 6th floor were playing pennies and nickels and dimes at him. I wasn't sure if they were throwing.
What's an itinerary?
Itinerant, a wandering guy, just playing the violin, like on the street, just playing the violin for itinerant. I have to look that up. I'm losing my English. I've been here over 30 years. And I wasn't sure if they were throwing pennies, nickels, and dimes at him to get rid of him, or the guy obviously was trying to make a parnasa, Right. And it intrigued me to the point where I bugged my parents for a year, continuously, I want to play the violin. And they finally gave in. My mother took me to opera, and she took me to the Fiddler on the Roof with Zero Mastel in 1966, 1967. And it just egged me on, I guess, and I just had to play the violin. Amazing. So that was the beginning.
So you have a special story about this violin, right?
Oh dear, okay. A special story, okay.
Tell us the story.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
I'll try to give the cliff notes, monarch notes for it. So I played the violin for 17 years. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Music Performance. And I started to go professional. And at the same time, I got married after graduating. And we started doing this thing called Shabbos. And after about a month, I realized that there was a bit of a dichotomy playing the violin on a Friday night concert and a Saturday matinee. So after about a month of struggling with, trying to sleep near where the concert was being performed, and not playing the violin or playing the violin and not keeping Shabbos, it was very confusing. finally decided that's it. It's one or the other. And making a parnasa as a struggling violinist is not easy when you're trying to raise a family. And so we decided, my wife and I decided to sell the violin. And we moved out to Minneapolis. And with the proceeds from the violin, we bought a house in Minneapolis, a down payment. So I wasn't missing the Bach and the Beethoven and the Mozart, and I was raising a family. We have 3 daughters that were born in the States. And we made Aliyah January 1st, 1991. Never thought about playing the violin since 1985. 1985, I put the violin down, I sold it, and I was busy raising a family. There was a mini kollel in Minneapolis, and I was learning and working and raising a family, and Shomer Shabbos and Shomer Mitzvahs. I was on the Chevra Kadisha in Minneapolis for 5 years. And we made Aliyah, and never thought about playing the violin, didn't miss the Bach and the Beethoven, the Mozart, the Brahms, didn't think of it once. Until a neighbor brought a 3/4 size violin to me and said...
Like a toy.
Like a toy, exactly. And I don't know how he knew to bring it to me. We must have talked about it, that I was a music major once upon a time. And all of a sudden, I found myself playing these beautiful melodies, the beautiful niggunim.
From memory.
Without sheet music, which was an anomaly, right? I wasn't the type of violinist that just played jazz and just improvised. That wasn't part of my training. My training was very classical. And so all of a sudden I started playing these beautiful melodies, and it was like, wow, if I had a violin, not this toy violin, that's, that Gaitnish that doesn't work compared to a $20,000 violin. Most violinists today have $100,000 violins that are in symphony orchestras. They get mortgages. Right. So we were. I started also at the same time coming close to Rebbe Nachman's work and his Bodadus and what's his Bodadus, and I started thinking about it. About Hashem. I spent 17 years playing the violin, practicing day in and day out for hours at a time. What was it all for?
Good question.
Right, what was it all for? And the year we made Aliyah was 1991. I went to Uman, there were 2,000 people there. And then the following year, there were 4,000 people, and the following year, 5,000 people. And when we went there originally, no connection to the violin and music. So many people were there that the indigenous population came down from their apartments with all of their worldly possessions and put them up for sale. All the knickknacks and bric-a-brac and tchotchkes, for $1, they would sell for $1. And they would make a windfall profit, because back then, in 1991, 1992, the annual Ukrainian salary was $20 annual. Right. So if they sold a couple of things for $1, $2, people walking away with clarinets and accordions for $5, $20 was already expensive, And I ignored it. I didn't pay necessarily any attention to it, because I was going to daven. I was going for Rosh Hashanah. I was going to be by the Tzaddik Yesod Olam, by the righteous pillar of the world. And so I never looked to buy anything. Well, one year, I think it was 95, 96, a neighbor gave me that violin, and that year I wound up going to Uman after Passover, not just Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, there were already 10, 20,000 people for Rosh Hashanah in Uman. It's a tremendous experience. I highly suggest to people to take time out of your lives and do something important.
If you like crowds.
Even if you don't like crowds, it's makes an impression.
Right.
And so I went there after Passover, and I had this idea, that's it, I'm gonna buy a violin, because I saw people doing that. And we got there, we were only 25 people, we weren't 5,000 people, and there was no market. It didn't pay, right? 25
right.
tourists,
too
it didn't
small.
pay for anyone to come down, and we didn't see anyone selling anything for a whole week. And we said the whole book of Psalms, Tehillim, every day, and we would get up and say the midnight lament, Tikkun Chatzot, and daven the first Shachris, the first Nate's Minyan at dawn. And we would learn, and then we would collapse, and we do it every day. And that Shabbos was Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Iyar, the new month after Passover. And I didn't see anyone selling anything that whole week. And Shabbos we were ate Sudah Shlishit, the third meal on Shabbos, and we sang just the most beautiful melodies. And I found myself by Rebbe Nachman's gravesite, and there was no one there, no one pushing, no one shoving. There was no one there, and it was pitch black. There was no electricity, and it was outdoors. And I started to meditate. I started to do what Rebbe Nachman suggests to do, to lehit boded, to talk to Hashem in your own language, with your own words. Hebrew is a very beautiful language, and we have a very beautiful Siddur prayer book, but it's all in Hebrew, and it doesn't necessarily roll off an English speaker's tongue like Shakespeare might, right? Or Russian like Tolstoy, right? And Rebbe Nachman says, speak in your language. You don't have to speak in Hebrew. It's okay, right? Because that's the best way to express ourselves. And so I found myself midnight standing by Rebbe Nachman's kever, and I said, Ribono Shel Olam, God, Hashem, 17 years, in the beginning a half hour a day, towards the end it was 8 hours a day I was practicing the violin. What was it all for? My father spent $50 a week for 17 years, more or less, on lessons. That alone is like, that alone would almost kill him. He didn't, he's still alive. Baruch Hashem. And he gets a lot of nachas when I play the violin. And I was standing there talking to Hashem like this, if I had a violin, I'd be able to play these beautiful melodies, niggunim, and make some people happy. And after about a half hour of talking to Hashem like that, I said, okay, it's time to go to bed. It's midnight, 1 a.m. And I walk out of the plaza, and it's pitch black. And after a week of not seeing anyone selling anything, there was one Ukrainian at 1 a.m. trying to sell a violin.
Unbelievable.
And there was no one there. It was me and him, and I cracked up hysterically laughing, because it was a celestial joke. It was like, what? And I didn't see the violin. It was in a violin case, and I thought for myself, for sure, it's toothpicks, it's broken. And I just laughed hysterically. Without seeing it, I asked him how much, and he said it was $10, $15. And I said, here's this $10, $15. And I brought it home and put strings on it when I got back to Israel. And I started playing the violin again, without sheet music, and all the beautiful Shabbos niggunim, the Shabbos melodies, and the holiday melodies, and Hanukkah.
Which
and
you
Purim,
never played before.
Which I never played before,
Right.
but I was learning them because I had a beautiful family, and that's, I was...
So you were doing by ear.
Yes, totally.
And so you started this group called, what is it called?
And so I have a trio.
Yeah.
It's not mine, it's ours. We're three guys that one is a classical flamenco guitarist, the other is more of a folk Karli Bach steel string guitar, and the violin. And we take all these beautiful Jewish melodies, and we have our various influences, whether it's folk or a little jazz, flamenco, and classical violin, and we try to make beautiful music. We have 7 CDs.
Wow.
This is the plug. We have 7 CDs. They're all available for download, right, on iTunes and
How do you find
Rhapsody
them?
and Napster.
How do you find them?
You have to www.simplytsfat.com. Simply Tsfat is one word, and the word simply, and then Tzfat in English is spelled many ways, but we spell it Tsfat.
That's how I spell it.
That's how you spell it, right? There you go. So simplytsfat.com, and that from there you can go to iTunes and just download.
Amazing. Do you remember that I actually brought you to London once?
I remember it very well. We played. We were in a very wealthy individual's house.
That's right.
And we're maybe about 10 people, and I don't think there were
I think
more
it was
than that.
more than that.
You think it was more?
Yeah, there's more than that.
Okay.
But it
Just
was
trying.
great. It was great. It was great. So tell me what music does to you that words can't.
Well, music, Rabbi Nachman, he says, I don't know where, but he says that music comes from the same place under the throne of glory as prophecy. So if you think where prophecy comes from is this little point that underneath the throne of glory, and that point is also where music comes from. And they say that music is that language above languages, right? And there's no one who doesn't love music. There's no one, you might have a preference and you might not like some forms of music, but there's very few people who say, oh, I can't stand listening to music. Unless I have tinnitus, right? But and as a matter of fact, it's said that the prophets, they could not attain their level of prophecy.
That's right. Unless
they had music as a precursor to their prophesizing. And it says that why couldn't they prophesy? They needed to be happy. People need to be happy and able to commune and to connect to God. You can't approach God depressed.
It doesn't work.
It's a form of contraction, of constriction, and you can only prophesize. I'm not a prophet. I'm told. You can only prophesize in a happy state. And how do you make yourself? How do you become happy? And the way they did it, the prophets, is by having music played for them, and they would get into it, and they would lift their spirits, and they would be happy, and they would be able to prophesy.
Amazing.
So music is that type of a medium that anyone and everyone can connect to. That's why it's so important that if you find yourself in a difficult situation where you're bordering on sadness, God forbid, depression, you're bordering on melancholy, take some music that you love, that lifts your spirits, and put that on. Don't get to a place where you can't even turn the radio on.
One of the reasons I wanted you to be on my podcast for Ki Tetzeh is because you go regularly to the States on concerts and to see your parents. And I wanted to explore with you, because you're very connected with Tzfat and Israel. What does it mean to you when you go out of Israel? Do you feel a different person? Do you feel a different experience of yourself when you're abroad?
That's very interesting. When you come to Israel, there's what they call a changing of the soul, Hachlafat neshama. I always wondered if it's the same when we leave Israel, like our Jewish neshama that we received coming here stays behind, and I don't know the answer to that. But I feel that it's a real shlichut. What's a shlichut?
You're a mission.
Mission.
Yeah.
There you go. A mission, a messenger.
Yeah.
To touch people that are very far. I was very far. I grew up in my house with a Hanukkah bush when I was a little boy.
Hanukkah bush.
For lack of another name that we all know very well, at the end of December, we called it a Hanukkah bush, but we had one.
Right.
And I was very far. And when I go out there, it feels like really it's a mission impossible. To touch people in a way that makes them say, "Wow, I'm missing something. I've missed something in my life." And what is that effervescence that's been missing? And it's hard. It's hard work. It's not easy. It's not work. The word work in Hebrew is avodah. Avodah, work, is hard. You sweat, and you have to struggle, right? That's why it's called work. It's an avodah, right? Whether it's work in a temple or work trying to reach people who are very, very far. I was very, very far growing up. And it's a war. It's a war with our own personality, with our own struggles, with our own personality characteristics, whether it's sadness or happiness or jealousy, God forbid. It's work. It's work. We all have these feelings. There's no one on earth that is missing one iota of any given personality characteristic. Everyone is made up them, just in different proportions. Some have a strong desire to eat. Some have a strong desire for money. Some have a stronger desire for other desires. And it's just a matter of proportion. And the reason why I go out there is because I have this talent, right? And I'm able to share with people non-verbally.
What advice would you give someone in the States watching this and wanting to convey to them the joy you have in living your life here in Eretz Israel?
When we left Minneapolis in December of 1990, it was a goodbye party for us. We lived there for 6 years. My wife was the mikveh lady. I was part of the Chevra Kadisha. And the rabbi gave us a mashal, a parable.
Yeah.
The parable was that there was a fellow from the Amazon who never saw civilized society. And one day, a helicopter came, picked him out of the jungle, and brought him smack center in the middle of New York City. And they showed him all the wonders that the world had to offer, digitally, analogically, whatever, buildings. And then they picked him up and they brought him back to the Amazon. And he went to his parents' mud hut, and he took a stick and he shoved the stick into the inside of the mud hut, into the wall, and said, "Mom, Dad, watch, water's gonna come out." There was the most amazing thing, running water in every house. It was just, it's gewalt. I have running water? This is magic. But he wasn't connected. He wasn't connected. So you need to be connected in order to get the water. And so my advice to anyone and everyone, even here in Israel, you're not immune, is to connect yourself. Search out your rabbis, search out the Talmidei Chachamim, search out the rabbis, the wise men, and connect with them. And through them, you'll get connected to Tzfat, right? Tzfat is just interesting. Tzfat is one of the 4 holy cities. I'm sure everyone has heard these things. And all the 4 holy cities are connected to the 4 elements: fire, water, earth, and air. Fire, water, earth, and air, the 4 elements. And so the Ari, in his writings, he compares musical instruments also to the 4 elements.
Oh yeah?
And so if you think about it, percussion or drums is earth. Earth is Chevron, where our forefathers are buried. And he says air, right? The clarinet or a flute, that's Tzfat, is a wind instrument. Ruach, that's Tzfat. Tzfat is air. And he says that most stringed instruments in general are water. If you think of a harp playing, it's like rain, or babbling brook, or a stream, rain, right? And so the last one that's left is fire. What's fire? What instrument represents that category of fire? So the Ari says the violin, because when we draw the bow against the strings, it's friction, and that's fire. And so what is the medium of music? Air. Right? There's no music in the void in space. There's no music underwater. And there's no music in the earth. You have to have air for fire and for music. Right? And so when it says in the Sfarim, in our holy books, that King David woke up at midnight. And how did King David wake up? He didn't have an alarm clock, right? How did he wake up? Oh, it says that a northerly wind came and played on his kinnor. It was really kind of a harp really back then. It wasn't this kinnor. This kinnor is like from Stradivarius. So it's only 1700s. But a northerly wind played on his violin and woke him up. And in Hebrew, north is tzafon. Tzafon is north. And tzafon is related to Tzfat. The northerly wind, Tzfat, is north of Jerusalem. The northerly wind from Tzfat, the music from Tzfat, played on his violin and woke him up. And this music wakes people up. It's wake up, right? Some people wake up with a slap. Some people wake up with a bucket of ice, right? But some people, you can't wake up suddenly. You're going to get a heart attack, right? You wake up softly and quietly to beautiful music, and slowly you realize, wow, what a heritage we have. It's so beautiful, and only music can express it.
Amazing. I hope you will give us the honor of playing a final piece for us.
A final piece.
Yeah.
So,
something that, I normally I ask my guests to give a bracha to the audience, but with you I'd like you to give us a tune and embed in the tune a bracha.
Okay, so the bracha is you should listen to beautiful music and it should wake you up and not put you to sleep.
Be happy. Thank you for bringing the fire of Jerusalem through the air of Tzfat.
Oh, that's right. There you go. There you go.
Yonatan,
my pleasure. Thank you for the
pleasure.
honor.
And I know you're going to the States very soon. Have a safe trip and come back soon to us.
Amen.
Amen.